if you look into platform engineering, it's all about enabling these experts to basically scale their knowledge in a way, right? Like understanding workflows from different like developers, security people, operations, understanding their workflows, and they're working with them to automate stuff.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 240, Supercharging Developer Workflows with Simplified Platform Engineering. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. Victor, we're heading into the holiday season, and I'm going to give you a gift.
Oh no, whenever I hear you're giving me something, I expect pain.
That's a good way to think about it. Here's your nice gift-wrapped box of platform engineering. Just like how we used to have DevOps in a box, now we have platform engineering in a box.
I was actually right in my suspicions because every year a company comes up with a new developer platform program, right? I've seen those we've been calling them different names, right? But attempts to create something that will help developers do things in an easier way, I've been seeing those things for at least 20, 30 years, I think. So how is your gift different than the gifts I received before?
The gift is in the eye of the beholder, right? On today's show, we have Mauricio on from Diagred. Mauricio, how are you doing?
Hello, folks. Hi, Darren. Hi, Victor. How are you folks doing?
Well, we'll see.
Interesting. I want a gift as well,
What gift would you like?
That's a very good question. Maybe like a very useful platform, but not like something very complicated and that's something that will take me years to learn as a developer to use.
Well, define a useful platform.
Yeah, like the platform that it's transparent, that basically allows me to do the things that I'm already used to do, but also takes care of all the things that I don't want to take care of, like pushing my code to production or creating environments and that kind of stuff.
Can I argue with you for just a second?
Let's do it.
I don't believe an end user application, a business application developer, should be doing any platform work.
No.
Zero.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? But it should be interacting with it, with a platform that it's not maintaining or building, but actually using a platform, more like as a user.
Okay. So if that's true, what level is it? Is it Apple level? I punch out and I just touch and everything's fine? Or is it more of the old school going into the coal mine and building my own tools and going in and having to do all the things?
I think that it should be pretty flexible, right? You should be able to tap and just get whatever you want. But at the same time, if you are willing to dig a little bit deeper, you should have access to different levels of abstraction so you can actually do your work. Sometimes if you just provide a button and you cannot change the functionality of that button or understand what's going on behind the covers, your mission, your task that you're trying to perform gets complicated because it's not exactly what you need. And you need to change something slightly, so understanding what's going on sometimes is useful.
I think that's actually a wrong answer.
All right, let's do it.
I think that users that you mentioned should effectively be treated as customers. And when you create a product for a customer, it doesn't matter what that product is. Dari mentioned Apple, right? It could be Android, it could be anything else. The job is really to figure out what they want. It could be only a button. It could be a script. I feel that that's where many teams fail when they're creating developer platforms, is we are guessing what people want. And when we guess, we usually guess based on our experience, right? Oh, I like terminal. Nobody should use a web UI, right? If I would be making a developer platform without speaking and understanding what my customers want, they would never get the web UI, right? Which is silly because they probably want it.
I tend to agree, but right, like I'm also like a little bit against the term of developer platform because again, that's putting kind of like a persona for like as a customer. Like in that case, the customer is a persona, right? But in a company, there is like developers are just one set of teams that they have a set of skills. So you have other people like the security people. What is the platform going to do for this kind of people? What is the platform going to do for operations people? So guessing what they need, it's pretty difficult when you have a broad range of skills and a broad range of kind of like, tasks that they need to perform. What do you think about that? Like the idea of calling them developer platforms? I'm a little bit against it because it's very focused on a persona. And classifying that persona, it's pretty hard.
I think that would lead us to the question, what is a developer?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that, correct me, Darin, but I think that when you said mention developer, you said end user developer, something like that, right? If somebody writes code, and by code, I mean something that can be interpreted by machines, that's a developer. So I'm not sure that infra is not developers. I just don't think that, I mean, they might be copying and pasting from a Word document. Then they are not, right?
Using
But
ChatGPT nowadays. Yeah.
exactly. But developer, we can say that that's not only people writing Node.js code. That can be infra.
Let's go one level deeper, right? Like the main reason why I kind of like to define what a developer is because developers using different technology stacks, they have different workflows. So then saying that you have a developer platform, well, basically you just need to make sure that you're mentioning also the technology stack that they are using because their workflows will be totally different. If you go to a space like in the Kubernetes space, then you're talking about polyglot applications where the end result is a container that will run somewhere. Then it becomes much more difficult to define kind of like what the workflow for the developer is because developers using different tech stacks will have different workflows. That's a given, right? Like we can just not ignore the fact that they do different things in different ways.
Well, to me, again, I think developer isn't a too broad of a term. It's just like saying engineer. Okay, are you mechanical? Are you electrical? Are you civil? What are you? Nuclear? It's developer to me is, I think that's where, as an industry, we've really messed up. We really don't know how to name things, especially ourselves.
That also has historical reason, Darin. I think that in the past, people working on end user applications were typically the only people ever touching any code, right? Testers never wrote code in the past, long time ago, right? Maybe still today. Infrastructure people never wrote any code, right? And so on and so forth. That assumption that a developer is only a fraction of people, I think it's rooted in the past more than, and just we transformed it into what we're doing today.
I tend to agree. Yeah, I tend to agree. It's all about, again, it's trying to understand what they are doing. I guess that the term business developer makes a little bit more sense because, again, they are building some end user, some customer application. Then it's not infra, then it's not testing, then it's not like it's like features for customers. And I think that internal developer platforms are targeting those kind of developers. But again, they can be using different tech stacks and different technologies to build their applications, different cloud providers. So the amount of knowledge that they need to have will be extremely different company to company, right?
I mean, if you were still one of those people doing mainframe development with COBOL, your developer platform is a terminal that's either green or amber.
Yes, that's the thing. But again, the amount of experience that you need to have in order to work in that environment, it's pretty high. You need to actually understand what's going on there in the mainframe, how to connect, what kind of tools to use. And I guess that like platform engineering nowadays is trying to come up with solutions for that amount of expertise that is needed to get started.
So assuming that we actually are able to get started, where should people start today? Let's say I am, okay, let's put the business application developer to the side. That's my phrasing. That's not a real phrase. And you're the person inside of an organization that is tasked with, better known as stuck with, having to build this for those clients, those business application developers. Where do you start today?
Yeah, so something that it's really that's a very tricky question to answer depending on your background and where you're coming from, right? Like I've been in the cloud native community for some time now, and basically the conversation always goes to how do we make developers use Kubernetes a little bit easier? How do we enable them to basically use Kubernetes without like learning how to use Kubernetes, and tons of abstractions around that space. But if I needed to do that for like a company, I would actually look into their developer practices, the technology stack that they are using, and then their target environments. How do this environment looks like, and how easy is to put something in those environments?
In other words, you would take inventory of the inputs and an inventory of the outputs, and what you're building is a distribution center in the middle.
Something like that, but like the inputs needs to include the developer workflows that they are using today, right? Like understanding the steps that they are doing today, so I can start improving on those. On the things that are painful, right? Like I don't want to improve on the things that are actually working. I only want to improve kind of like where in the points where they are having in pain, or in the points where they're getting delayed on delivering software.
I feel that that's the part where the problems with initial assumptions companies have start to occur. And that's that once you start looking, as you said, right, you'll find that there are problems with security. You will find that there are problems with managing databases. There are problems with Kubernetes. There are problems with in many different areas, right? Then you as a single person or a team even, right? You're going to inevitably sooner or later come to the conclusion that you cannot understand all those problems yourself, right? Because how are you going to, for the sake of argument, and I'm going to make assumption that you're not a security expert, right? How are you going to improve security part of that workflow, right?
So usually, like if you go to any company that it's actually operating, you will find the security experts, right? And I guess that's if you look into platform engineering, it's all about enabling these experts to basically scale their knowledge in a way, right? Like understanding workflows from different like developers, security people, operations, understanding their workflows, and they're working with them to automate stuff.
So in a way, if I understand what you're saying, and if I do, then we're have a very similar opinion. Then you as a platform person, you're not really building a platform. You're enabling that security person in this example to contribute to the platform. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's why I think that like when we take the platform engineering discussion on the Kubernetes space, that's where it becomes a little bit complicated because we cannot say that like if a security person is using a non-Kubernetes tool, we cannot tell them, okay, now we are going to switch to the Kubernetes version of this tool to solve the problem because that's not in their workflows. So at that point, as a platform engineering team or as a person, I would just try to automate all the Kubernetes things that needs to happen for that security person to keep using the tools that they are used to use while making the Kubernetes experience a little bit more transparent for them. So we don't push them to learn all the Kubernetes space that probably they are not even interested in learning.
Does it have to be Kubernetes space, right?
It doesn't, yeah.
That was going to be my question is, what if there's no Kubernetes in the place and they just don't care?
Yeah, and that's totally valid, right? Like, and that's what companies have been doing for years. Even when they started using cloud providers, they needed to build something on top of cloud providers for their teams to use. Like, it's kind of like a big ask to ask, all developers, all security people to learn about like the thousands of AWS services. You need some AWS experts that will enable other teams to consume these services and probably do some basic like some large configurations or basic configurations for other teams to just consume stuff, not push them to learn all these things. And Kubernetes is just another tool that we can use to abstract away some things, but with those abstractions, complexity comes in, and we need people to take care of that complexity for other teams to just do the stuff that they're supposed to do.
The part that I feel that many are failing is, okay, I do the first part, right? I enable you to manage your application in Kubernetes or as Lambdas or whatever that something is, right? And then how do I enable that somebody to... So management is not only I run my Lambda function, it is also I can fix my Lambda function when it fails, right? Now, how do I do that? Because I cannot just say go to AWS, because if I say go to AWS, then why did I do the first part in the first place, right? Because either that person should go to AWS without me or he shouldn't. If he shouldn't, apart from creating Terraform script to create Lambda, let's say, how does that person observe and debug and fix?
That's a very good point, right? Like, and I'm very going into that space into the Kubernetes communities, because I believe that, first of all, if you are trying to provide developer experiences of things that are going to run in Kubernetes, we need to make sure that there is kind of like an offline Kubernetes experience that most developers are used to. You build your applications, you run them, you debug them, you test them, you write the unit test and everything locally. And then you deploy these things kind of like in a cloud provider. I think that's something that we haven't sorted out very good right now, and that's something that I feel that it's coming in this space, is to make sure that observability goes one to one between kind of like the local experience and the remote experience. If you have kind of like an observability story that allows developers to build their stuff, test, debug, and everything locally, and they can observe how the application is performing, maybe logging, maybe tracing, in the same way that it will be running in their environments, right? Like if they have the same similar UIs, same similar ways of querying for the application state in different environments, then this transition from I'm running it locally, or maybe I'm running in a remote environment that it's not production, and then when I'm running in production, I have the same level of visibility, observability, access for debugging, and all these things. I haven't seen kind of like a consistent experience there, but I have the feeling that communities are going towards that direction. I don't know what you feel, folks. You probably have your own opinions.
Let me come up with an example. Let's say Knative, right? I love Knative, and I'm pretty sure you like it too. I think that Knative is personification of what I'm trying to say. Any developer can define Knative YAML. Doesn't matter whether you write YAML or you go to some web UI, right? It's that simple, right? Anybody can create their application with Knative. However, if you say, okay, I enabled you to run your applications through Knative, and Knative behind the scenes will create services and K services and this or that, right? The moment it stops working, the autonomy is gone. There is no way for a person who is not a Kubernetes expert to find out what is happening with his or her application.
Yeah, I totally get it, right? Like, but again, then the question from me to you would be like, would you tell developers about Knative? Knative probably wasn't in their flow, in their workflow before, right? Like if you're running kind of like a Go application or creating kind of like a Java application, you don't care about Knative at all, right? This is more about like when the application is running in an environment where Knative is being used to deploy the application, you need to make sure that that developer actually can access to the application code and then have reports of if only Knative pieces are failing or something is going wrong, but not in their applications, right?
If I would jump into Knative project with that goal, right, I would say, okay, you nailed the interface, right? Now figure out how to nail events and logs, but not by pushing everything down people's throats because they will not understand. Maybe there should be a mechanism to propagate events of case services and whichever other components it is spinning up into the main one so that I see only the logs of Knative. I mean, I don't have the answer. I'm a troll in this conversation, but what I want to say is that we cannot just focus on this is how you create an application. We need to focus on the whole life cycle and create it at the right level of abstraction all the way, not only the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And for that, you will need to have that concept of an application running even locally, right? So when you're running the application locally, you can actually access the logs, but you need to also be able to see kind of like the application state in a way that when you go to production or to a place where Knative is installed, you're getting in a consistent way the things that are going wrong in the Knative space, right? Like you should be able to see it like maybe on top of the application logs or close to the application logs. And then you can say something like, okay, if I'm seeing errors at this level, well, this is a platform issue. That's not something that I can fix, right? Like it's something that, the platform is failing.
I feel that you came to the critical point from my perspective, at least. Because what you just said, what is a platform issue and what is my issue, right? Once we figure out that division, like when I use AWS, I never have the problem we're discussing, right? I never get information about, okay, hypervisor in this zone is completely messed up, right? That's their problem. I'm going to call AWS platform in this case, right? There is a clear division what I see and what they see. And I feel that when we are building ourselves platform, there is no that differentiation. You see everything or you see nothing. There is no your problem, my problem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that by doing that, we are just pushing to users a lot of complexity and then scaring people away, right? Like people that doesn't want to learn about Kubernetes is because it's too complex and it actually doesn't add anything to their workflows, to their application workflows, right? Like they want to build applications and they are just getting stuck with lots of logs from Kubernetes or from containers that are failing to start. So that's kind of like the thing that we need to fix. We had a very good abstraction, like the Kubernetes APIs and containers and all that stuff, but those are way too low level for for application developers to understand what's going on if they actually don't need to understand what's going on. But going back to the beginning, right? Like going back to the question from Darren, like I guess that again, because of the state of the things nowadays and the complexity of all these tools, I think that giving access to these tools to people that it's interested in looking into the details, it's okay as well, right? Like sometimes you need to troubleshoot and you want to actually understand what's going on there.
Yeah, I think that's going back to my comment before, right? You cannot figure out, I think we were discussing, should we have a button or not have a button? It doesn't depend on my decision. It's the end user decision, right? If all my developers feel like they should go deep into low level details, then why would I disallow that, or the other way around?
Yeah, and then again, it's like, but my heavy criticism to like the discussions of platform engineering on the Kubernetes space is that we just need to look at cloud providers and just basically copy some of their mechanisms. Again, like Google Cloud Platform, it's called Cloud Platform because it's actually a platform. It's at the different level of abstractions of the platforms that we try to build for companies. But again, they are doing a lot of this stuff already, right? Like the finding the right data for users, defining their personas. They have been doing this for a long time. So I think that most of the time is like, okay, what are they doing? Let's look at like how do they expose information? What's the intended persona for that information? And then just try to follow some of those things.
It's interesting that you bring Google up in that case. If you think about how it started, at least publicly, they had GKE, and then they had GKE Autopilot, and now they've got Google Cloud Run. So each of these levels of abstractions, we initially started out with just raw Kubernetes, more or less. And now we say, here's my image, go run it.
Exactly.
But to me, that's a progression that had to be there.
Actually, GKE, I think, is a better example there than Google Cloud Run because GKE and GKE Autopilot based on the same technology. Like Google Cloud Run, you could say, okay, this is a completely different thing. But GKE and GKE Autopilot, same thing, different levels of abstraction, right? That's the major difference. I know that there are some other internal differences between those, right? But the major difference is what you present to users rather than what is behind the hood, right?
Yeah, and basically, I guess that they did that because they found out that like tons of people is having issues managing Kubernetes when they were creating GKE clusters, right? And I guess that, well, let's make it easier. So they actually identified the main workflows and then just created a solution for it. That's exactly what we should be doing. And again, going back to Cloud Run, right? Cloud Run is the perfect example of having the Knative APIs for doing this. But I'm 100% sure that when a developer deploys, like send the container image, they get the right errors. Like more like these are the logs, or this is like platform failing, right? Like this container is not starting. Well, there is something wrong.
I think though that even though they may be running in Google Cloud Run, they should never have to go to the GCP console to find that out. That's the last place. We initially were talking about Apple experience. I'm going to take it even simpler. To me, what a platform should be, that the hardest part of it should be, is the Google homepage experience. I mean, just a general Apple experience is 1,000 times more complex than the Google homepage experience, which is a text box and a submit button, and sometimes a nice little pretty art image. Why would it need to be harder than that?
I totally agree. We are far, far away from that, at least in the Kubernetes space. Nowadays, it's like you need to install these 20 things that do not work together. So then you need to figure out how to make them work together and then figure it out like if they are actually doing what you need to do. And it's hard.
In all honesty, there is infinitely more complexity behind Google search that Darren was mentioning as well. So
behind.
The complexity is
behind.
there.
Yeah.
Exactly. There is no need for me to deal with it.
I think that's where we mess up, though, as people that are tasked with building platforms is we do not think, and Victor, I'm going to use your phrasing, we don't think of those people that are using it as clients. We think of them most of the time as somebody that's stuck using whatever we provide them.
100%.
So how do we make changes to that?
I think that you gave yourself the answer, right? We make changes to that just by treating them differently. Tell me a company, I mean, you might find one, but not more, right? That has guaranteed customers and at the same time is doing a good service.
Oh, but I was going to say, initially, I was going to say the government on the first answer, but good service on the second, not necessarily so much.
But government is a good example, right? You have an administration, let's say, what's the name when you get your driver's license, right? The DMV, right?
Yeah, the vehicle stuff, yeah.
Do they have competition? Can people choose whether they're going to deal with them or yes or no? No. So what's the incentive to have to provide a good service?
Optimizing costs for taxpayers, I guess. That's the only thing.
No. I will say in my state, the DMVs are run by private entities that are contracted with the state.
Okay.
So it's not that they are trying to optimize cost for the end user. They are trying to optimize cost for themselves.
Exactly.
Which is what every company will do, right?
But here's the thing. If you're faced with a situation in which you can lose customers, then we're talking about different types of optimization, right? There is optimization that I want to do things cheaper for me. But if I lose you as a customer, then I need to start thinking about providing a good service. And people who work on internal services, they very often have a mandate. We're going to create this and everybody will have to use it. Right? It's a mandate kind of. Whenever you need to use this thingy to confirm that your application is secure. I'm inventing silly example, right? And then there is no incentive for this thingy to fulfill the needs of the end users because they have no other option. Now, if you as a company say you can be secure in any way you want, here's a service you can use. If you think you can do better, then do it yourself. Then the things I feel start improving.
And I think that's related, like the cost optimization, right? Like, and making sure that you're using resources in the most cost efficient way. It's something that, again, like it needs to come to the platform discussion, because some companies are just building platforms to make sure that they use the resources that they have available in the right way, not to optimize any developer, workflow or just to make the life easier for developers, but just to make sure that, the cloud resources that they are consuming are very well used and very well managed, something that it's not usually the case. So it's kind of interesting to see, like you have the developer angle of platforms, then you have the cost optimization things, the standardization across very different teams on how to do things as well comes into play. And always like that, it's who are we trying to enable with these platforms, or what are we trying to make better by creating different platform initiatives? I don't think that there's a single answer. There is no single developer platform that will cover cost optimizations as well, right? So you need to combine all these initiatives together, and then you will have this kind of thing that it's called a platform, that it's a mix of different things being implemented at the same time by an organization.
So assuming we're actually able to build this thing and we're doing the right thing, we are working on the client, we're treating our customers as clients. By the way, I've said this before, the difference between a customer and a client is all in how you approach it. A customer is transactional, a client is relational. If somebody is having to use your platform, I'm going to argue that they are a client, whether they like to be or not, or whether you like it or not, because you're getting a mandate from above that's telling both of you, you have to use this. What if we work in an organization that just doesn't care? Like, I've got money to burn, and I hear this platform engineering thing is great, and I played golf with somebody, and they're going to sell me some platform engineering in a box. What should somebody inside an organization like that, how should they approach things?
Yeah. So first of all, I guess that they will need to evaluate what kind of problem they are trying to solve with with this platform, right? Try to see if they are actually facing any issues with that, or if they actually can improve something for their internal teams with this platform. And if that makes sense, then yeah, totally evaluate the solution and see if, instead of building something, you can actually buy a product that is solving some of these challenges for you. But it always really depends on how much experience do you have like in the field, and also how much visibility do you have on your teams, and what are kind of like stopping them from being more productive.
We keep coming back to visibility, observability.
Yeah.
I have probably a very contrarian take on this, go figure. In a world where I live, the clients of the platform should never have to log into the platform. Ever. It should be completely headless.
Nice. Interesting. Okay, that's an interesting approach. What kind of clients do you have then?
Well, let's say that it is primarily business application developers that are interacting with their Git SCM. And they should never have to leave their Git SCM except in one case. Well, okay, two cases. One case, it's coming into their messaging system. So there's a notification that goes into Slack, Teams, whatever you're using, doesn't matter, that, hey, something is wrong in your runtime. Or, hey, there was something wrong with the latest build of your bits. That comes into the messaging system.
That's really good. Yep.
And then that messaging system drives them to a place that may or may not be in the platform proper. That they actually get to see, okay, here's the, and I don't even want to give them raw logs, but not at the very first. There should be a summary that shows up first of what's going down. And then, hey, you want to see more detail? Okay, then you can click and get the raw stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a valid assumption if you don't want to connect to an environment, right? Like if you do want to connect to an environment, actually you will need to sign into like a single sign-on that will give you the keys to access that environment. If you are like in an environmentless approach where you just run things locally and then just push to Git and then the platform will take care of the rest, then just accessing to see, for troubleshooting, maybe that's the only reason why you need to log in. But then I tend to agree that having some kind of like Slack integration or messaging system integration where you can actually see what's going on makes a lot of sense. But going back again, right, like you will find these odd cases where you need to go and look for more details. And in those cases, the platform should have the right UIs for teams to troubleshoot, to understand what's going on, right? At some point, you will need a dashboard to see how many projects are running or how many repositories are being managed, because you might want to register a new one or have access to see what other projects are being delivered by the platform. So I tend to agree, simplicity first, and trying to reduce the surface of tools that these teams needs to use, but at the same time, providing them access if they need to.
You know what? I still disagree with that. I'm going to go back to the Google homepage. We said that experience is great. An image, a text box, a submit button. Now, what's behind that? I will never in my wildest days completely understand it. And I think that's how it should be for those end users of the platform.
I feel that that's similar to other examples we had before. We mentioned Google Cloud or AWS, right? You will not get information about the hypervisors, right? Simply because the only thing you can do with that information is get depressed, right?
100%.
Or you get information to know enough that you may need to escalate. Mm-hmm. Because what we don't want to do as platform engineers is to spend all of our time building all of these things until we see the patterns to know how within our organization, how things actually work.
I tend to agree. But comparing kind of like the Google homepage to platform engineering might be a little bit misleading. I mean, if you go to compare like the Google Cloud Platform homepage to the platforms that people are building today, it's mostly because they have different personas and different tasks. In the Google homepage, you can only search for things and get results. But developers that actually need to run applications or interact with environments, which sometimes you need to, like it's difficult to avoid, it's a different set of tasks and challenges that you will face.
Eventually, people should get to all the details, everything, right? But I feel that the problem is that we don't have anything in between, typically, right? So let's say that your application, Knative, I'm going to use it as example, or application in Kubernetes, forget about Knative, right? It's failing. You have two options, either to see the status failed, right? Or to see the details of the logs and events of all the Kubernetes resources. There is nothing in between, right? And when there is nothing in between, then of course I need to go to the details that I don't understand. I feel that we are failing to build something in between. Kind of what would be if I'm building something that people will use on top of Kubernetes? What can I offer them that is in between? Nothing. At least I don't know of a way how I can take Knative and filter it somehow and show only the things that are really relevant and not the rest.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but projects like Kubela and all the projects that are trying to define what an application is are actually trying to create that abstraction layer that goes on top, right?
Yes, but not Kubevela, for example, provides great abstraction of how do I define application. But when it doesn't work, there is low-level Kubernetes details or nothing. There is nothing in between. There is no separation to say, okay, if you see this, your abstraction that you created of Kubevela is failing. And if you look at this, then low-level detail behind it is failing, right? No separation.
Yeah. But it feels like that, right? Like it feels like you need the abstraction first, and then you need to be able to show the logs or show kind of like report errors when they happen. So the responsibility then it's clear, right? And again, going back to your point, I think that you're totally right. Like we have or Kubernetes people that you need to understand everything, or developers where you just don't understand much about the runtime and what's going on, right? And you have people that will understand everything, but at the same time, for those who don't, we need to provide the right level of status reports for them to understand without understanding the entire thing. And I think that that's the main thing that we're discussing here, right?
Exactly. I think that we got since early days of Kubernetes, I'm going to keep using it as example, we got very good at creating abstractions that enable people to create and manage something, right? And now we should be probably entering the second phase of how can we use that experience of creating abstractions to enable people to create applications, let's say, or something else, for people also to observe those same things.
I think that like the Captain project is doing something really nice in that space where you can actually, annotate your Kubernetes deployments with a bunch of Kubernetes standard annotations, and then they aggregate data around that. Again, maybe you will get access to a bunch of stuff, but there is definitely now like a layer of data that it's tagged with these annotations that it's mostly targeting to application developers, right? Like it's mostly saying them, like there's something wrong in this application that is composed by 5 different things at the end of the day, but you don't care about that. It's related to this specific application. And then if you see something there that it's not like the application logs telling you that the application is failing, then it's platform related stuff. So I think that might be one way.
You were talking earlier about local and remote.
Yes.
I mean, to me, if I'm building a monolithic app, I can do that in 1,000 different ways. But I have a feeling that you are probably thinking, just like all you crazy Kubernetes people think, fully distributed. So how would I, because I've seen this thing, it's like, okay, I'm working on my microservice now, but now I have to connect up to this other cluster to get all the other microservices so I can understand what's going on. There has to be a better way.
There has to be a better way. Yes, 100%. 100%. There are things, we have the practices, in software development, we have like ways of testing applications without booting up all the other things by creating mocks, but automating how do we create these mocks by using standard interfaces to generate mocks for other services. But it is complicated. It's really, really hard when you go to companies and see that they actually are not doing any of that. They are using, for example, Docker Compose to bootstrap, 20 services for testing their application locally. And that becomes challenging for developers, again, because of the amount of resources that they need in their laptops, or because they need to access like specific environments with very specific configurations that somebody will need to provision. Again, it's complicated. I guess that for monoliths, it really depends. You can be building a very large monolith application, but still you need databases, you need stuff to run that, and you usually will not mock that kind of stuff. So you will need to start a local one or connect to a specific database that is being provisioned for that purpose. So how do we actually make this easier? How do we make this easier, no matter if it's, like a container, if it's like a monolith application, or even if it's a function that, for example, requires like the entire platform to run, like AWS Lambdas? How do you make kind of like testing, connecting to infrastructure easier? It's something that I'm really interested in, and a topic that I keep researching into it and just building POCs and testing different tools around that.
What's some of the interesting tools that you've seen in that space?
Yeah, a couple of tools that I can mention. Victor already mentioned Knative. It's pretty good for just the scaling up stuff. But when you are like doing local development, that's not kind of like something that you are considering how the application will run and how it will be scaled. You are more focusing on just building your applications. And I guess that the project that I'm working on now at Diagrid, it's Dapper. It's a CNCF project that allows you to connect your applications to infrastructure using APIs. So now, as a developer, you don't actually need to worry about like the different environments, different storages, or different message brokers. You just interact with APIs, and you build that kind of local experience where you can start your applications locally, consume these APIs, and provide like a local implementation for those APIs without like the need of having databases running remotely to connect with, and then worrying that this database might be different from your local environment to the production environment. So if you want to take a look about that project, just go to dapper.io, and knative.dev are projects that are being mentioned a lot when you look into platforms, when you look into functions as a service platforms as well, and in the Kubernetes space where people is just gluing different tools together to provide this local development experience in a way that it has some kind of parity with the production environment. So you write applications that can be moved to different environments without worrying too much about the things that they need to run. Those two projects, definitely check them out.
So at your day job at Diagrid, that's at diagrid.io, you had mentioned Dapper there. Well, gee, go figure. Dapper is a big part of Diagrid.
Yeah, it is. So, and basically what we are trying to do is like, we are very active in the Dapper community. We just want to take this project forward. We want to make it more usable, provide more APIs for people. Now, I think that I consider Dapper as basically these abstraction layers for people to interact with infrastructure across cloud providers and across like different providers of the infrastructure, right? Like different database vendors, different, message broker vendors. So developers actually can just use APIs and get started building their applications. In Diagrid, we are building solutions for that. We actually have like a management component that you can install in your clusters and then collect information about all your applications. Then you get observability, something that we mentioned before, right? Like having that observability across local development and, things when things are running in production or in different environments. You can collect all the data, see the data in the same way, and understand how your applications are interacting with different components. Of course, if you're interested in Dapper itself, feel free to just contact me if you want to contribute, if you want to get into the project. And there are tons of examples out there of how to use it and how to build applications using it.
Give us a quick overview of what a good example app. What is the prototypical hello world for a Dapper-based app?
Yeah, so like a very simple Dapper application can interact, can use APIs to store data, into a key value store and retrieve data from it without actually knowing which implementation of the key value store is being used. So you can be interacting with Redis or even like Mongo or PostgreSQL, storing keys and retrieving keys without knowing where that PostgreSQL database is, even if it's in the cloud, in a cloud provider like Azure or Google Cloud or AWS. And then basically you have this view of the world of saying, I want to emit a message, I want to store data, I want to send notifications or do any kind of like business operation that your applications will need without worrying about like the infrastructure layer of things. And this tool is kind of like two-faced. Like you have that space for APIs for developers to build applications and features, but also you have the configuration for platform engineering teams to say, this infrastructure is available, so I will wire the implementation of these APIs differently depending on the environment that they are running. Again, we are targeting business applications, right? Like we are not targeting any crazy things, right? Like we are targeting business developers that are creating features for their applications.
The boring things that make companies money or saves them money.
That's correct. And when you kind of like jump into the Kubernetes space, most of the things are how do we run things, how do we operate things, not how do we build features for our customers, which is interesting.
So all of Mauricio's contact information are going to be down in the episode description, but I will go ahead and call out again. Dapper is at dapr.io, and Diagrid is diagrid.io. Mauricio, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. And I will include like a discount for my book that I've just published called Platform Engineering on Kubernetes, which is very related to this. And I think that I can get like a 40% off or something.
So this is through
Manning.
Manning?
Yep.
Well, actually, I have a code for that too, but we can use your code.
Let's do it.
So Platform Engineering in action, I would guess, since it's a Manning book.
It's correct? Platform Engineering on Kubernetes.
On Kubernetes. Yes. Sorry, you said that and I didn't say it. Okay. All right. So since you have written a book, as we wrap this up, what was that? That was your first book?
It is my first book on the cloud native space, right? Like I wrote a couple of books about like frameworks before. In this case, it's the first book that I'm writing about Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem.
Are you going to write another book after putting yourself through multiple already, or is this it for you?
It is so painful. It took me almost like 3 years, and I already have kind of like the hints for doing kind of like another version of this and another completely different book. So I'm saying, okay, I maybe need to take a break for at least a month, and then I might make a decision about that.
At least a month. I thought that you would say at least 10 years. Okay, a month is nothing.
The moment that you publish a book, you said, I will never do this again. The day after that, it's like, I should be doing kind of like the next edition or something because it's already old, right? So it is like that.
Thanks again, Mauricio.
Thank you, folks.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.